It's time for more Manifesting Original Rich Bitch Experiences. I'm your host, Ava Bilkey. Welcome back to the More Pod. I hope you are doing well. It's been a minute. I was not planning to drop off the face of the earth, but there are moments in life that we can't plan for, right? And back in the spring, I had a really incredible healing experience. I did a really intense hypnotherapy journey with a very talented hypnotherapist. But it was a 4-hour session and it was a one on one hypnotherapy experience. And so many things came out of it. But one of the things that was most present for me coming out of that experience was simply that I felt like I had nothing to say. I felt like I had absolutely nothing to say, and so I didn't. And I think that's okay. I think that, in 2024, in the world of podcasting, in the world of social media, in the world of being always on, taking a step back is not the favorable approach. But I feel like you can sense when somebody needs to take a step back. And for me, I'd rather just take my time versus like forcing myself to show up here on a weekly basis if I felt like I had nothing to say. So I might have a separate episode on hypnotherapy if that's of interest to you, um, because it was very intense. It was very interesting and highly recommend, but also like it was bad for the pod. You know what I mean? But that's okay because you win some, you lose some. I'm happy to be back. I missed you. And so I wanted to give you a little travel talk story time. Recently, I took a 24-hour trip to Brooklyn. My intentions were to just take this trip for me. It's a quick trip, no podcast, no recommendations, no story time, just Ava and Brooklyn. But I had such a good time that I want to tell you about it. And it was such a short trip, but it was truly full of the highest highs and the lowest lows. Like, let's just get into it honestly, because we're going to lay it all out. We're going to lay it all out there. So, genuinely, I had the best time. And I think I had the best time because I was taking the pressure off, right? Sometimes when I travel with the intent of coming back to you with really awesome restaurant recommendations and hotels and all sorts of activities and shit to do, it's like sometimes it almost alters my experience in the moment. And so something that's been coming up a lot for me lately, and I think Emma Chamberlain actually just talked about this with the rebrand of her show, is like the concept of taking the pressure off. Sometimes when we're putting pressure on ourselves to make something next level, best of the best, more is more. I feel like sometimes when there's too much pressure on any given situation, it simply cannot unfold the way it's supposed to. So I think the result of me having a great fucking time in Brooklyn was honestly because I took the pressure off and I had no intent of sharing it. So I share this with you because this theme and this sort of lesson almost has been coming up a lot for me this year. If that resonates for you, I encourage you to think about that. Like how could you take the pressure off in certain areas of your life and let things flow more freely and just see what happens? Because I think what happens is going to be 10 times better than what you expected when you're putting yourself in a super high pressure situation. So, back to the travel. When it comes to getting there, why 24 hours? Ava, why would you just book a 24-hour trip? If you're going to go through all of the hassle to book a flight, find a hotel, pack your bags, get your ass on a plane, like why is it so fast? If you ever have traveled for work, you might also kind of have this, maybe it's a habit, right? When I rewind and reflect on my time as a corporate America girly, I used to do a lot of travel for work. And when I was traveling for work, it was At the most frequent point, it was like one trip a week, 3 weeks out of every month, okay? That's a lot of flying. But when you're on the road that much, you kind of want to just like get in and get out, right? You're like, I'm going here for a meeting and then I'm going home. Or like, I'm going here for a seminar and then I'm going home. So I used to get in the habit of like quick in and out of different cities, right? We're talking like 12 hours in Ohio or 24 hours in Salt Lake City, like quick trips. But with these quick trips, I used to book my flights. Like, say I had a meeting at noon on Tuesday, I would book a flight that left at 7 a.m. on Tuesday and got me in at like 10:30. And then I'd, Uber from the airport to the meeting, had the meeting, and then I'd flip and come back home. That used to work. I would argue that does not work anymore. That does not work anymore. I feel like, and maybe you've experienced this too, travel is becoming, specifically air travel, is becoming less dependable. It seems like ever since, these Boeings started losing their parts, I have heard more stories and I've had more personal experiences with flight delays, cancellations, reroutes, all sorts of weird shit that just it slows you down. And this was no different on my trip to Brooklyn. So, the whole reason why I went on this quick trip is because I had a tattoo appointment in the city on it was on a Friday. Initially, I was planning to fly in on Friday morning. Thank God I didn't. I had to change my flight to Thursday night. And it's a damn good thing I did because had I flown in the same day, I would have completely missed the appointment. Everything started out looking great, right? I'm getting on my flight to LaGuardia. We've boarded, we've pushed off from the gate. As soon as we hit the runway, all flights in and out of LaGuardia were grounded. Um, great timing. Okay. So all flights were grounded and it was happening in real time. So initially we thought, okay, well, we're going to wait here and see, how long it's going to be. And essentially we were told that there was too much air traffic. And again, I think this is one of the kind of indicators of this increasing difficulty around air travel. As we were sitting our asses on the runway, I did some research and also learned that there's an air traffic controller shortage. And specifically in New York, like it's a tough airspace to work in, understandably so, because there are so many planes. Think about like they've got 3 airports in that little area there, and they've got all these people flying in and out of New York City. So that's something I learned on the runway. Neither here nor there. But for the first hour, we just sat there. And then when the second hour came around, we rolled back to the gate. And at that time, they gave us an optional deplaning, meaning if we wanted to get off the plane and go back into the airport, we could. Or if we wanted to stay in our seats and sit on the plane, we could also do that. I thought this was a little crazy. Like, I had never had the option before of whether or not I wanted to sit on the plane. But, they kept saying, like, oh, it shouldn't be much longer. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to sit here, like, why do I want to load and unload my luggage again? Like, I'm going to sit here. So that was the second hour of the delay. By the third hour of the delay, it was a mandatory deplane. So then everybody had to get off the plane and go back into the airport. And thank God that happened because it was another like 2 to 3 hours before we could finally reboard and take off. Needless to say, this was a 5-hour flight delay into New York City. The lesson here is that you can no longer book a flight for the same day. If you have a meeting, if you have a party, if you have an appointment, there's no same day flights anymore because this was an absolute shit show. And I don't know, I don't know about you, but I just feel like there are so many instances of this and there's more issues with air travel. Something feels suspicious to me. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but eventually, we make it to LaGuardia Airport. And I did corroborate the story the next day because I was already suspicious. I'm like, was it raining here? Oh, in addition to the air traffic, they told us it was weather. I was like, was it raining here yesterday? And I did get some feedback that it did kind of look like an end of the world. Like the skies were green. So the weather was legitimate. And I'm assuming the air traffic was legitimate as well. So that's okay. We finally get there. And that's the important piece. When it comes to where to stay, I recently reviewed a previous trip to New York City that I did at the top of the year. And at that time, I had realized every time I've been to New York City, I always stay in Manhattan, somewhere in Manhattan. And so in January, on my way out of New York City, I felt like as soon as we crossed the Williamsburg Bridge, like something about the energy just shifted. I felt like maybe staying on the other side of the river would be a nice change. And so I kind of, I took that ping, I put it in my pocket, I stored it for later, and then I actually referred back to that. So that's how I found myself staying in Brooklyn this time around. And I'm really, really glad that I did. I love it over there. Good vibes, good times. I absolutely loved it. I found it to be a little more quiet in the sense that there weren't trucks unloading at like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. I really didn't hear as many sirens. Um, it just felt like after a certain time of night, things actually slowed down. Whereas when you're in Manhattan, like literally it's a 24/7 buzz. And it could have just been the hotel I was in, like, it had some really nice thick walls or something, but I really do feel like it was a bit more laid back. And so, if you're somebody who's like, "Man, like, the New York, like, rise and grind just isn't fucking for me," try Brooklyn, check out Williamsburg, like, Bushwick, like, look over in that area, give it a try because I think it feels much different, and personally, I really enjoyed that. When it came to my hotel, I stayed at the Hoxton in Williamsburg. Now, I fucking love the Hoxton. The Hoxton Hotel brand is a London based brand and they're fairly small, but I want to say they have maybe 20 hotels globally now. And New York City was their first US location. I think they've got like one in LA, one in New York, maybe one in Portland. Okay. But if you find yourself in a city where there is a Hoxton hotel, I would encourage you to check it out. Their motto is like doors open to the city, the neighborhood. They really aim to like bring in the location versus like, sometimes hotels can feel like you're shutting everything out. This hotel, they really aim to like bring the city and bring the community in. And I think it makes a huge difference. And the way that I experience it most is in the hotel lobby culture, if you will. So, my first experience staying at Hoxton was in Shoreditch in London when I was spending the summer there. And I spent quite a while there. But one of the things that I noticed immediately is that the lobby was packed, like absolutely packed with people from morning until like 5 or 6 o'clock. And then they have like a no laptops policy, um, which I also love. But it just feels like a really cool place to like have a coffee meeting, meet up with someone, get some work done, like have a little breakfast. Really, really good vibes. And I was super excited to find that this was the same in Williamsburg. Another thing I love about the Hoxton is the finishes are luxurious. Lots of brass, lots of velvet, lots of just high quality textures. And it's kind of Soho House adjacent. Like they very much could be designed by the same people. And like, I don't know, but they do look similar. Or it could just be that they're both like these little London based niche brands. And then that's just sort of the vibe you end up with. Regardless of how we get there, I love it. The Williamsburg property also has fantastic views of Manhattan. So after my 5-hour flight delay, I was thrilled to check into the Hoxton, and I was even more thrilled when I got my room because I realized that they gave me the photograph room. They gave me the room that they take the hotel photos of and put on the website for booking. I guess we could call it the model room, okay? I had the model room. And the thing that's thrilling about having the model room is it is the best room in the whole hotel, right? Because it's the one they choose to photograph. It's the one they choose to represent what all of their rooms look like, even though the model room is the best room. Okay. So that was a little silver lining to the treacherous journey, which was getting there, was having the model room at the Hoxton Williamsburg with the best sweeping view of Manhattan. Like, we're talking every building, the whole skyline, the river, there's like boats driving by. It was so fucking cute. And I was thrilled. I think I just like looked out the window for the first hour and a half. Like, it was golden hour. We were thriving, we were vibing. And when we say we, I mean me and my phone, had to get some selfies in. Um, and it was a moment of redemption. But really great hotel, really great property, and I got the best sleep at this hotel. Like I said, I think they have thick walls. I didn't hear anything all night long. And to be in New York City and not hear anything all night long is like unheard of. It's absolutely unheard of. So if you find yourself in Brooklyn, you're looking for a hotel, check out the Hoxton. Since the 24-hour trip basically shrunk down to like a 20-hour trip or less, from there, after checking into the hotel, I needed to make the most of the evening, right? Because I got like one evening in Brooklyn, but I think that I spent it well. And so this itinerary, you can literally lift shift if you find yourself somehow in Brooklyn for an evening, okay? So this is how I would recommend you spend an evening in Brooklyn. Since we're having Brat summer, first and foremost, I needed to see the Brat wall. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me just fill you in real quick. Charlie XCX is bringing back club music, okay? She just released an album called Brat, and it is truly a club record. I'm talking, this is what you listen to before you go out for the evening. It's what you listen to when you're in the club. It's what you listen to on the way home from the club. And it's also what you listen to when you're walking down the street pretending like life is a party. Okay. I love this album so much. It sounds exactly like its title. It's bratty, it's bitchy, it's confident, it's vulnerable, it's full of bangers. Like, it's so good. The album just dropped. So part of the promo for this album is a brat wall. What is a brat wall? It's basically a wall in the middle of the city that's been painted like the album cover. And to give you the visual, the cover of this album is chartreuse green. And in the middle of it, it just says Brat in like lowercase black, kind of blurry writing font. And when the album cover was released, everyone's like, is this a joke? Because it looks really lo-fi. It's absolutely not a joke, and it is now being muraled across the world, honestly. So one of the first Brat walls to go up was in Brooklyn, and it says, I'm your favorite reference. Okay. So picture green wall, black writing, I'm your favorite reference. It's a line from the song 360. Now, if you're still confused, just go listen to 360 by Charlie XCX, and I feel like you'll get it from there. Obviously, I had to go see the wall, right? And it was like maybe a 5-minute walk from my hotel. I wasn't feeling bratty enough to take my own photo in front of the wall, but I did photograph the wall. So I'll insert some sort of photo on the podcast socials so you can just see what the fuck I'm talking about. But that was my first stop. And honestly, it was kind of a nice way to start off the evening, do a little stroll. It's golden hour, snap a little photo of the Brat wall. I'm your favorite reference. Yes, absolutely. Mind you, the whole time I'm listening to 360 in my AirPods, right? So I'm like strutting down the street, having a very meta moment where I'm walking by the Brat wall, listening to 360, and I'm like, I'm so Julia. Yep, that's right. Okay. It was fabulous. If you want to go and look for the Brat wall, it has since been painted with her extended album. I think it's now white, but it still has Charlie XCX writing on it. It's located on a wall of a rock climbing center directly across from the lot radio. So drop a pin. Drop a pin at the lot radio and then look for the rock climbing gym and you'll see the wall. Speaking of the lot radio, this was my next stop on my little evening in Brooklyn. And this is a place that is uniquely New York. This is the kind of shit that makes the city cool. This is the kind of shit that happens in New York City, but it doesn't happen in Minneapolis. And so the Lot Radio is a 24/7 streaming broadcast radio station, independently owned, that exists in an old shipping container on an abandoned block in the city. DJs, they go in there, they're streaming music 24/7. So like if you're to pull it up online, like you can listen to the radio right now. There's somebody in there. I just think this is so cool. So anybody can go to the lot radio. It feels very much like a public space, like there's benches, but they also sell coffee and wine. So this is a fun little meetup point. If you've got a friend in the area or you just want to go like sit and journal and people watch, go to the lot radio, sit down, have a glass of wine, listen to some music. This is a good time. It's a good time for all. So that was my next stop. And I don't know, like after seeing the Brat Wall, after chilling at the lot radio for a little while, I was like, wow, I do love this country, which I rarely say. I felt like, that moment like where spring transitions into summer. Maybe it's like you notice how green the grass is. Or maybe it's just like you get your first little like sunburn of the season. Like I feel like everyone has a moment in that seasonal transition where you're like, it is officially summer. And for me, that moment this year was sitting out at the lot radio, listening to some music in Brooklyn. That was when I knew it was summer. So if you like music and you're in the area, definitely stop by. That's a fun place. Fred again has played there. Like you never know who's going to be in the little shipping container. That's the coolest part about it. Anyways, moving on. From there, I wanted to hit a couple of vintage stores, right? Because I was in a great mood. I was feeling lucky. And that is the best way to go into vintage shopping and thrifting, right? Because you have to bring that luck and that hope and that optimism with you on the hunt. I maybe walked a few blocks and stumbled into my first stop. It was a place called Beacon's Closet. This is just one of many, many, many vintage and thrift shops in the area. If you love vintage shopping, like this area is full of options, which I feel like it increases your chances of finding some good stuff. There was tons and tons of stuff in the store. Accessories, boots, belts, clothes, everything was organized by color. So there was like a huge rack of black items. There's a huge rack of pink items. I mean, every color it was organized by color. So it was good. It was a little bit overwhelming, but I did snag a belt for $16 that I'm really excited about. It's a black leather belt and I think it has like a pewter buckle. It has a little patch and the little patch on the belt says love and it's written in it's like embroidered in like kind of an old English style. This belt perfectly matches an Ed Hardy bag that I thrifted earlier this year. And so for me to find a thrifted belt that perfectly matches a thrifted bag, I mean, that was mine, right? Like that was waiting for me. And it was $16. I was like, yes, and you just when you find when your hunt is successful, there's no better feeling. I got my $16 belt and I was like, great, next. Okay. And then I walked through the park. I don't know the name of the park, unfortunately, because I didn't think I'd have to tell you the name of the park. But I went to another place called Awoke Vintage. This was a bit more of a curated shop. So if you love like less stuff, but more kind of aligned to a style, this was a more curated shop. And I actually think they have three locations, but the location I went to was in like a mall mart area. Like there was multiple stores kind of within the same building, and the building had like opening stage store inside. So it was kind of a cool vibe. But I found a couple of pieces at Awoke Vintage as well. Um, Both of them I actually think were picked in Italy. So I'm like, ugh, that checks out. One was a black and white kind of knit striped tank top sweater. And then one was a black kind of athletic cropped racerback with fuchsia stripes. So cute. Like Adidas, but not. Um, so yeah, I feel like, and all of this happened within like a 2 to 3 hour span, right? We're like, boom, Brat wall, boom, lot radio, boom, belt, boom, thrifted tanks. Like I was winning. I was winning at life. And it just made for a really fun afternoon or evening. So at that point, the sun was setting. And so I figured I should make it to dinner somewhere. So I walked a little bit further and found myself at a restaurant called Sunday in Brooklyn. Now, the funny thing about Sunday in Brooklyn is that I have been to Sunday in Brooklyn in London. And I always find myself looking for a little piece of London everywhere I go. So it was really fun for me to be able to dine at the original Sunday in Brooklyn restaurant, obviously in Brooklyn, having been there at their second location. This place is really good. They have like really awesome brunch. Obviously, I was there for dinner and I got the fried chicken sandwich. Now, I feel like everyone has their own proxy for which they compare restaurants, right? Like maybe you are a pasta aficionado. And so, like, you have to order the pasta dish at every restaurant. And you're like comparing across restaurants. For me, my meter of measurement is a fried chicken sandwich. Like, that is my thing that I love to get at every restaurant. And I'm like, this place is good. Or like, no, this place is not good. So, I'm happy to report that the fried chicken sandwich at Sunday in Brooklyn is very good. And it was a little different than the one I remembered in London. I feel like they had a different sauce on that one. Like it was very much coated in, it wasn't barbecue sauce, but it was coated in like this orange sauce. Now, the one in Brooklyn is not coated, and it actually has more of a, it has like more of like a Mexican vibe. And what I mean by that is it has chipotle, lime crema, and cilantro. Okay. So interesting combo, but very, very tasty. And it's just a classic. A fried chicken sandwich, French fries, Coca Cola. Boom. Good spot. Solid brunch. Very good chicken sandwich, and I'm sure other things. So that was a win. That was a win. To round out this evening itinerary in Brooklyn, you have to walk back along the river walk. After the sun is set, all the lights come out, all the buildings are lit up. It's so gorgeous. So I walked back from the restaurant to the hotel along Domino Park. So Domino Park has really great views of the Manhattan skyline, the river. You can see some of the bridges, and it has like a river walk. And if you were to like look this up online, you would immediately recognize it because I feel like so many movie scenes are shot in this specific spot because it is truly gorgeous. It is one of the most beautiful scenes in all of the city. And they also have benches and it's really well lit. So it feels really safe. It's not like some sketchy river walk, right? Where you're like, I shouldn't be here. It was very much this is a public park, like we want you here, this is an activity. So walking through Domino Park, gorgeous views of the city skyline at night, all the buildings lit up, and the perfect way to just top off that evening. So this lovely evening in Brooklyn all leads up to my reason for trip, for the 24-hour trip to New York City. I went back for another tattoo. That's right, traveling for tattoos. I can't get enough. Last time I was in New York City in January, if you listen to that travel talk episode, that was my reason for trip. And it was also my reason for trip this time. So I went back to see my girl, Mira Mariah, AKA Girl New York, for another tattoo. And the first time I went, we did a flash rose piece that I absolutely loved. I got it on my right arm. This time, I was lucky enough to have her draw me a custom piece. And so I wanted like a matching set, if you will. But I worked with her on a rose bud. So it's like the growth process, if you will. So I've got this super cute new custom rosebud baby on my left arm. And it was just such a great experience overall. Like, I really value and respect artists so much. I think that they live in their creativity in a way that I'm always striving to create, like, incorporate more of into my life. Like, I want to be creative more often. And I love surrounding myself, even if it's just for an hour, right? With artists, with creatives who practice this on a more ongoing basis. But, the vibes are always top notch. Like tattoo, drawing, artist, studio, like good conversation, slightly disassociating because I'm being tattooed. Like it's a fun time, right? And so if you are looking for an artist, check out her style and see if it resonates with you. But she's also doing a lot of really cool programming right now. So if you live in New York City or if you're in the area, take a look at Girl New York, see if there happens to be a gallery showing or a studio event that intersects with your time there, because they're doing a lot of really cool things. And if I lived closer, I would want my ass over there in that studio like every single week. Definitely a lot of cool programming going on at Girl New York. That was the climax, right? Like that was the peak of my very quick trip to Brooklyn. Getting home, not gonna lie, another kind of slightly traumatic flight experience. We took off in time and everything, but my flight route was rerouted on the way home I was flying from LaGuardia to MSP, and typically it's like a straight shot. You can just fly right over the Great Lakes and it's like a 2-hour flight. Apparently, the wind was so bad this time around that we were rerouted like an hour off course up into Canada around the Great Lakes to make it home. So the flight time was extended by over an hour, but that wasn't the scary part, you guys. The scary part was the landing. Okay? We already know that it's windy, but we've made it back. We're in the area. We're cleared for landing. We go to land at MSP. We're literally like at the airport, maybe 100 feet from the runway, like 100 feet between the wheels of this plane and the ground. And suddenly we accelerate and take off again. And my first thought was like, oh my God, we're being hijacked, right? Because that's kind of a uniquely American flight trauma, I think. That's my first thought. I'm like, this plane almost just touched the ground and now we're taking off again. And we did like a full like re takeoff. And The whole like 15 minutes before we heard anything from the pilot, we're all just sitting there in silence, right? Like the guy sitting next to me is doing like a nostril breathing technique. Like my heart is pounding out of my chest. I'm wondering like where the fuck we're going because we were just at the airport. They finally get on the speaker and they tell us that like we had to re-stabilize. Okay? We had to re-stabilize. So we make a loop-de-loop and we go back in for a second landing. And I was like, I don't feel like today's my day. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like today's my last day. But for a moment, I was like, do I text my mom? Like, that's how disturbing the whole situation felt. We make the second landing. But you know, the whole time it does kind of feel like one wing is up and one wing is down. Like it was a very sketchy situation, but we landed. Okay. And now I have survived to tell the story about my double landing. Okay. I don't know how common or uncommon it is. I feel like I've taken a lot of flights, but the double landing was a new one for me. So, like I said, lots of high highs and lots of low lows. What have we learned here from this experience? First and foremost, we've learned that we're having a brat summer, okay? Charlie XCX is single-handedly bringing back summer, and she's carrying us all on her backs. So go ahead and listen to Brat and let me know how much you love it because it is the soundtrack of the summer. What else have we learned? We've learned that we are giving ourselves extra time. We're giving ourselves extra time when we travel. We are no longer flying on the day of an important meeting or event or party. There's been too many interferences. And so we're going to plan those flights ahead. That's an important lesson. I think we've also learned that there can be a lot of benefit to slightly switching up your geographical location, right? Like if you've been to New York before and you've only stayed in Manhattan, like see if you like anything across the bridge. Mixing up the location is something that I feel like you'll know intuitively, and you can also confirm with locational astrology. And lastly, I think we have learned here today that it can be beneficial to take the pressure off. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves all the time for various things: work, personal, hobbies, travel. And it's enough, you know? Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Take the pressure off. Because look, I was not planning on having a travel talk about my time in Brooklyn, but here we are. 40 minutes later, here we are. We're having a great time. So there's room for improvement when you take the pressure off. With that, I think that's all I've got for this week. I'm super happy to be back here. I've missed you so much. I hope that your summer is off to a great start. Tats and Brats in Brooklyn all the way. And I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please write a review on Apple Podcasts. And that goes a long way to helping other people discover the show. I really appreciate it. And I think that's formally all I've got. Listen to the More Pod every Wednesday as I share the things that make me more me and discover a thing or two to make you more you.